Hey guys, it's Michael and we have quite a lot to talk about. So you might have noticed that all of the videos on my channel are gone and the channel look has had a little bit of an upgrade. Basically it's been like a year since my last video, maybe a year and a half, I'm not entirely sure. As you know, I'm a student, I'm at university, so running a YouTube channel and doing that was quite a hard balance to strike and I just wasn't making it work. But we're back, we're hoping, thoughts and prayers that this is going to work. I really want this to work because I absolutely love making booktube videos. It's like one of the things that gives me the most joy in life. That sounds quite deep, but you know. But yeah, a lot of things have changed personally in the world, in the reading world as well, and my reading taste has changed quite drastically. Not drastically, but like quite drastically since my last span of videos. So I thought today I would share with you 5 of my recent favourite books. Now when I say recent, I have not been giving out many 5-star reads, and I don't know if that's because of the books I'm reading or just because of me in general, but in literally the last year I have had 5 5-star books, so I have no clue what is going on. This year especially has just not been going my way. You know, these 5 are like genuinely 5 favourite books, so maybe it's just that I am being more selective with my 5-star reads, or maybe I am just not reading the right books. But yeah, I'm here to tell you 5 recent 5 stars. First up is one that was quite hyped to me and I was really excited to see on the reading list for one of my university courses. So that was In the Dream House by Carmen Machado. If you do not know, and if you've not read this, I feel like everyone has kind of read this. It is basically a non-fiction memoir written in quite a weird way. Machado uses the metaphor of a dream house to kind of use this as a space where an abusive relationship can exist and take on different forms as a process of like dealing with that. Machado was in an abusive relationship with another woman, and this novel kind of explores the history of queer relationships as well as queer abuse in relationships, and also just her experience and how she's dealing with it. But all of the different genres that are used in this dream house metaphor are just so interesting. The novel, despite being non-fiction, kind of uses fictional techniques such as like metafiction and like unreliable narrators and stuff to tell the story, which is just makes it such an interesting novel to both read and study. I literally flew through this and read it in one day. Even though it is quite a heavy novel, it is just so engaging and so well written that it just made me want to read and read and read. She also touches on the topic of villains and antagonists, and specifically queer villains, and the debate on that was one of my favourite chapters, just about, you know, how like, should we have queer villains? Does that villainize queer people in real life? Or should we celebrate queer villains? It's kind of, I don't want to spoil too much because I feel like this is definitely a book that just needs to be picked up and read and experienced. But basically all of the discussions in here are just so provocative and really lent itself well to an essay, but also just to a general reading experience. Sticking with the orange theme, in fact all of the books in this stack kind of have like an ombre effect, which makes me very happy to sit and look at, but you'll see in a minute. It is Cleanness by Garth Greenwell. I always want to call this book Cleanliness, I think just because it like looks like cleanliness, but it's cleanness. The novel is inspired by Greenwell's own experiences travelling in Europe, and it is set in Bulgaria. Yep, Sofia, Bulgaria. And it follows him as he's like an American teaching there, and I can't remember what it is he teaches. I'm pretty sure it might be English, but basically he just has a number of experiences with different men, and being gay in Bulgaria is kind of a touchy topic, I suppose, specifically in the novel. But it basically just is kind of almost like short stories. They're like 50 pages each, and it's just like different experiences with different individuals. Some of them are students, some of them are sexual, some of them aren't sexual, but each of them have a different message. This novel was just very profound to me. It felt really reflective. I felt so connected to the main character despite it just being short stories. I just really loved what this book had to say about love and how multifaceted it is, and how it explored different aspects of love, whether it be sexual love or platonic love or familial love, or even how familial love can be between two strangers who aren't actually blood related. I just loved each of the stories and each of the way they you know, like formed the novel, and I love the title. I don't know why, I just like, once you read it you kind of like understand it. If you get it, if you get it, you don't, you don't. I've never really heard people talk about this novel, so please, please read Cleanness. I really want to read another one of his novels called What Belongs to You, and I'm pretty sure there's a few other ones as well, but you know, I love this cover as well. I don't know, vibes, so much vibes. Next up is my most recent 5-star. I read this book last week and I feel forever changed since I read it. It is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jaqueline Harpman. This is kind of sci-fi dystopian classic vibes. It basically, I don't really want to talk too much about this novel because this is definitely, it's very short. It's only about 170 pages. This is a book you just need to pick up, read, and be forever changed by, because to give a brief synopsis, we are following this young girl who is locked in a cage with 39 other women and they're being guarded by men. And this book has so much to say about interactions between genders and how important it is, and what really happens if humans are blank slates and are stripped of everything we've ever known, stripped of a past and a future and a present, and just made to live a very basic life. And this really isn't a spoiler, but they escape the cage in the first few pages. This was a book that I finished and just had to lie down, and it really triggered an existential crisis. I don't really know why, but it is just quite a hopeless novel, but also such a hopeful novel. That doesn't really make sense, but like, I keep just saying, if you get it, you get it. You don't, you don't. But this is just, as it says up here, the New York Times says this book is a small miracle, and I have to agree. I also loved a lot of the discussions in here about writing and books and art and legacy and about being alive. Those discussions were all woven together so well. You know, the protagonist hasn't been exposed to novels but ends up being exposed to books, and the way that she interacts with books, having never been able to read or write or know anything, know any context, was just so interesting. I cannot recommend this book enough. I feel like this could really be read by anyone. It's kind of sci-fi, kind of dystopian, but mostly literary fiction. So yeah, I feel like anyone could really read this. Next up, we have How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This book is literally insane. It is loosely linked short stories set in a pandemic setting. It starts like from now and spans over hundreds of years, maybe not hundreds of years, maybe about 100 years, and all of the characters that we follow, all of the snippets and vignettes of life, like slowly progress into a plot. One of the biggest comparisons for this novel is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, which if you've read and loved, you would love this as well. The prose in here is so lyrical and magical and whimsical, but it's a very real, very deadly book. Some of the stories seem quite ridiculous upon first glance, but there is a real heart to all of these stories, and they all deal with the subjects of life and death and mortality in such sometimes disturbing ways, and I felt quite unsettled by this book, but it also made me tear up at some points. I would say around 3/4 of the novel actually take place after the pandemic, which was really interesting to see how the world like struggles to rebuild itself and how culture survives and how the pandemic was documented and just the impact of it. One of the most memorable stories from this follows a theme park for children affected by the plague who will go on one last ride, which sounds very dark. It is very dark and it's very disturbing, but basically they like get sent on a roller coaster and they get like drugged, or I can't remember exactly the specific details, but basically on this ride they will die. Should they die by the plague or should they have a more merciful death? It was really uncomfortable, really unsettling, but honestly one of the best books I've ever read, which is why it's in this video. And lastly, we come to a book that has been quite a booktube darling. I would say more so in like 2014 era, which kind of sounds weird, but it is We Are the Ants by Shaun Hutchenson. I literally read this book in a matter of hours. It follows a young boy called Henry who believes he has been abducted by aliens, and that setup alone was just enough to get me into it because, you know, are the aliens real? is he making this up, or has he actually been abducted by aliens? Like, what is going on? Is this a metaphor? Like, what's going on? But this book was literally just such a perfect read for me. I loved all of the discussions around suicide, depression. The main character's boyfriend has also committed suicide, so is this linked to the depression? Is this why he's maybe making up the aliens? Another aspect of the novel, and kind of the inciting incident, is that he has been given the option to end the world. When he gets like continually abducted by aliens, and he's always given the option to press the red button and destroy the world. He doesn't know what's going to happen when he presses the red button. He assumes the world is just going to end. But this novel really gives me chills. I really want to reread this novel, not particularly because of reveals by the end of the book. I feel like this is quite an ambiguous novel. By the end of it, you don't truly know everything. You know enough to be satisfied, but there are a lot of unanswered questions, which I love with a book. But yeah, I feel like I don't really need to scream about this book anymore. I know a lot of people have read it, but if you haven't, it really is worth the hype. Shaun David Hutchenson's writing was really emotional, and this book made me cry quite a lot. But yeah, this is my lovely little stack of recent 5-star reads, or these are like my only 5-star reads in the past year. But you know, I'm really happy with this stack. These feel like really solid favourite books, and books that I'm constantly recommending to people, that I'm constantly lending out, and I just cannot scream about these books enough. So if you haven't read them, would 10 out of 10 recommend. But yeah, that is the end of my video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys stick around for this new era of my channel. And yeah, I will be back so soon with a new video. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know if you're interested in these books. If you have books similar to these, I feel like all of them have a sort of sci-fi fantasy element, but very minimal, and they're all kind of weird, is kind of what I would say. So if you have any recommendations similar, please let me know down below. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.